Now we're into the top 10, Pat Robertson. So why is Pat Robertson in the top 10? Well, he's in the top 10 for all the reasons. Falwell's in the top 10, plus some other pretty important stuff too. So that's why he's ahead of Falwell. He too was born in Virginia, so all of these right-wing evangelical pastors coming out of Virginia. He served in Korea in the Marines. 1954, he gets married. 1955, he gets a Bachelor of Law at Yale University. 1959, receives a Master of Divinity degree from New York Theological Seminary. So you see, he's more educated than Falwell, and more going to the traditional paths. Law degree at Yale, divinity degree at New York Theological Seminary. And we get in pretty early to why he's on the list. 1960, he establishes the Christian Broadcast Network in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Christian Broadcast Network is still with us today. 52 years later, CBN is still around. And if you look in the religious channels on your cable system, and you just flip through them a couple times every day, the 700 Club is always on. Somewhere, it's always on.
Still sometimes even appears on regular network
television. Yes, yeah. 1961, he's ordained as a minister in the Southern Baptist Convention. 1966, he established the 700 Club television show, so named after the original 700 contributors to the 1962 telethon. So, the question I'm going to ask now doesn't have to do with whether you like Pat Robertson or not. The question is, how many of you have ever watched even a part of the 700 Club? Raise your hand. See the influence he had? 74 is really when things explode. 700 Club goes into national syndication. And then suddenly, boom, it's everywhere. 1977, CBN goes on cable and begins airing the 700 Club. He also forms the Regent University and served as the chancellor. 1987, he announced that he'd be running for president of the United States on a Republican ticket. He did run. He would go on to finish second in the Iowa caucus, and he won the Washington caucus. So his results were not unlike Ron Paul in the recent. Ron Paul won a couple of the caucuses. I think he won, Nevada and Maine, I think, are the ones he won. What else? August 1988, he founds the Family Channel, which is now ABC Family. That's still on, still with us. 1988, he founds the Christian Coalition, which still exists, but does not have the level of influence that it one time had. I would posit that ultimately the Christian Coalition was more influential than the moral majority was. But 1990, founds the American Center for Law and Justice. Pat Robertson, one-time minister of Southern Baptist Convention. He is no longer. He brought evangelicalism into the modern age with his astute use of technology and the media. This guy, we talk about Ted Turner as being the king of cable. And you could say Pat Robertson was the king of cable too. He's a guy who figured out early, about the same time that Ted Turner did, that you could create an empire using cable television. And he did it, just like Ted Turner did it, Pat Robertson did it. Known for his unflagging efforts to unite white evangelicals in the American political system. I always make this distinction because we err sometimes, I think, where we assume all evangelicals are white. There's a large strain of evangelicalism in the black church also. Now, the politics are different, but evangelicalism does unite them somewhat. I mean, you could make a case Jesse Jackson was an evangelical pastor. His politics are different than Pat Robertson, but they're both evangelicals. So Robertson started Christian Broadcast Network in Virginia Beach, Virginia in 1960. It was on a single television station. By 66, the 700 Club was up and running. Goes national in 74, and in 77, it's released to cable. and the rest is history. Robertson founded the Family Channel in '88. He sold it eventually to ABC Family, and it's still around. Protestant evangelicals are often credited with the two landslide elections of Reagan in the 1980s. They certainly, in the first election, were a silent force that didn't show up in the polls anywhere. They showed up to the polls, but didn't show up in the pre-election polling. Robertson ran for president in the Republican primary against George Bush Sr. He did support George H.W. Bush at the Republican convention, which is more than Ron Paul did for Romney. But his run sounded a warning shot across the bow of the Republican establishment. Even by '88, the Republican leadership was already taking the evangelicals for granted.
It's like a Tea Party.
And that's one of the reasons he ran. He wanted to put a scare into the Republican establishment. And I think he was successful. Christian Coalition probably was enough to put on the list by itself. Founded a Christian Coalition in '87 and didn't really become active until after his presidential run. The initial focus was on encouraging the nation's 65 million evangelical voters to get out and vote. How many of you, whether you like Pat Robertson or not, that's not the question. How many of you ever saw a Christian Coalition voters guide? Yeah, a few of you. They used to hand them out in evangelical churches. In time, the Christian Coalition became involved in other matters, such as providing legal help to Christians who felt they had been discriminated against because of their religious beliefs. Ralph Reed started running the Christian Coalition in '89. And Robertson is also the founder of the American Center for Law and Justice. So again, whether you like him or not, if you look at his resume, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty influential. And he's up there in years, but he's still in the 700 club from time to time. And I don't agree with everything he says, but you can't deny his influence. Kristen.